Philip, I don't know if you're aware of this or not, but we have a published author in our midst. And over the past year and a half, we have watched this young lady go through the throes of writing and getting her book published. She's given us updates. She's shared with us from her book. We've always enjoyed it. Now, can you look at the screen and guess who the author is? Of course not, because it's Sheila. And Sheila is also at level 5, which in her pathway, that's it. I mean, that's the top of the heap, the big dog, the number one. Is very important. Her pathways is presentation mastery, and I believe by the time you get to level 5, by golly, you had better mastered it. But there's always room for improvement. But tonight's speech, which will take about 18 to 22 minutes, is entitled "So You Want to Write a Book? Do you?" I don't have that much focus. But this evening, Sheila will share just a few tips she has learned on her writing journey. The ups, the downs, the ins and outs, the best ways, the worst ways, everything she has learned over the past year and a half, all compiled into about 18 minutes. So by the time she's done, we will all know exactly how to publish a book. So no pressure there, Sheila. With her level 5 speech, "So You Want to Write a Book," let's give a big warm welcome and a wave of jazz hands to Sheila Textor. Sheila!
Thank you this afternoon, Toastmaster Keith. Well, it's a good thing that I really got a hold of this speech and worked on it. Y'all disappointed me. I wanted it to go backwards. That way I wouldn't have to worry about how good my speech was. But that's okay. It's no accident that this has happened. The title of my speech this afternoon is "So You Want to Write a Book?" I want to ask a question to all the members in the group. And I would like to see a show of hands. Is there anyone in this group this evening that has wrote a book or aspire to write a book? George, I thought that you had wrote a few books already, if I'm not mistaken. So that's great. First, let me say that it is definitely a goal that most people have had at one time or another. I seldomly run into people, I run into people a lot that say they want to write a book. And I want to share some writing tips that I have learned along the way. And as most of you know, and now Philip, you know, that I have wrote a book and it is on Amazon. The first tip that I would like to leave with my listeners tonight is to do your research. Research on the different types of writing. Would your book be nonfiction? Would it be a memoir, a fiction, novel, mystery? Because each one of those genres are different and they require a different avenue. Tip number 2. I would like to offer this one. As you begin to do your research, don't read or listen to too many voices, whether it's books or YouTube. I made that mistake and I got stuck for a few months. Find you a couple of people that you connect with in the genre that you are trying to write or inspired to write. One of the reasons that I suggest just a couple of people is because I found out there is no one way fits all. And that's what I went looking for, that way to write a book. And I got messed up by listening and watching too many people. Some people are early risers and they write early in the morning. Some people do their best work at night. The main thing is to actually get the writing tips, not necessarily when the people write. The third tip I would offer you this evening is, after you find out what kind of book you are writing, to look to see what the word count is in that particular genre. This was an eye-opener for me. I'd never heard of word count before, and I didn't know that it mattered. In a memoir or a nonfiction, usually about 40 to 50,000 words is the norm. When I first met the lady that would help develop my writing into something that people would want to read, she mentioned word count to me. Well, I was proud of myself. I'd done wrote 10 chapters and wrote 10,000 words. Well, that all changed when she told me I needed about 50,000 words. It was overwhelming, to say the least, but I was determined to get this book out that others could read it. I'll tell you though, I only made it to about 30,000 words. But I also found in my research that short is the new long. And one of the reasons is people's time is extremely limited, and more people are consuming short reads. Don't let that discourage you though from writing a 50,000 to 100,000 word book, because there are some readers that won't read anything less. Actually, statistics show that a lot of people still love a physical book, and they like reading the longer books. It really depends on your reader and the genre that they have chose. The fourth tip, this was one of my favorite ones. The fourth tip I would like to share this evening is to show, not tell. Keith even mentioned this a few weeks ago. I believe Tanya had either did a speech or was expounding on something, and he come in and said, that's the hook. That's what you hook the reader with. But this was something that I didn't know about. But being a reader myself, I understood the concept quickly. This simple yet powerful knowledge could make the difference between someone reading your book or not reading your book. I don't know about you, but I want people to read my book. If you don't hook your reader in the first paragraph, or at least the first chapter, then they probably will not read it. And I want to give an example of a couple of these ways of writing, of telling and showing. Like I just expressed in that tip, when you work a year and a half on a book, you want someone to read it. But we're going to do the telling first. Caleb was hit by a car while playing on his small neighborhood street. Of course, Caleb's mom was devastated, but turns out he only had a few cracked ribs. Now this is the showing part. This is the emotional part. This is where you got to bring your reader in and make them hang with you and feel what you are saying. Caleb's mom heard a scream from the street that would cause any mother to go into panic mode. She felt numb as she ran toward the car and the crowd that stood around her son, that had just moments before let out a blood-curdling scream. Expecting to see her son laying in blood, he laid there without any outward physical marks. Soon the x-rays would show only a few cracked ribs. Now, as a mother, even as I read that, I felt I could hear the scream in the background. I felt my heart, that panic mode when one of your children are hurt and they scream. That's what you want to do. You want to bring your reader to feel the emotion, to see you running, to see that child with that blood around them, even though that's not what happened, but that's what you picture. Okay, tip number 5. Now, I didn't say this to begin with, but these are in no particular order. There's no greatest to the least or least to the greatest. They are just tips that I learned along the journey. But tip number 5 I want to leave with you is your title. Most of the time, people have in their mind what they want to title their book. But when it comes to marketing your book, the title is pretty much the first thing that will hook your reader. And I learned if you're not famous, you need to keep it short. Catchy, of course. In some of my research, I found out that some people are so bent on what they want to title their book, they're not willing to change it to draw more readers or even make money further down the road. One of the largest search engines in the world, Google, what is the number one sentence that most searches start out with? People are going to go to Google and they're going to search. And they're going to start out most of the time with how to or how do. This was some of the marketing skills that I had learned along the way. These words are called keywords. When you put your book out on a publishing platform, it will show up in the search engine if that's what people are looking for. Now, I want to add this also in this tip. This kind of like it's still in the same tip, but it's kind of changing at the same time, but it's still wrapping up the words. And it is, you need to place keywords throughout your book, possibly on the back as well in your teaser. When I published my book on Amazon through the KDP, which is the Kindle Direct Publishing, it gave me a place, kind of like in the dashboard behind the scenes. It gave me a place to put 7 keywords that might show up in the genre that I was writing. And also in the description on the publishing platform will also sell your book. So on Amazon or KDP, whatever platform you put your book, they will allow you to put a description in there. And if you can put some keywords in there, if someone goes to Amazon and they're looking for a certain book, if those words are very popular, your book could very well come up before that reader. I realize that some people write books or desire to write a book just to say that they have. And they don't care if it sells. So these tips I'm giving tonight are mainly for someone that may be wanting to become an author of multiple books or maybe make a living writing. It all depends on what your goals are if you desire to write a book. Tip number 6, and maybe I should have put this one first, but this is your book cover. The cover is at the top of the list when trying to hook your reader. This may be one of the first things that you work on. But just like your title, you got to be willing to adjust or change it altogether. So I contacted a Toastmaster member last week and contacted her again today and reminded her. I wanted her to give a brief description just to kind of come in here and break up the little speech monotony thing here. I wanted her to give a brief description of what she looks for, because I know she is a reader. What does she look for when she goes to the internet, to the bookstore, wherever, that grabs her, or what is anything that she's specifically looking for when she's looking for that book to read? And I would like for Toastmaster Tanya to please do that for me tonight.
Thank you, Toastmaster Sheila, fellow Toastmasters, and our welcomed guest, Philip. What I look for in a book, and I'm going to use the bookstore as an example. For me, it's not necessarily the title right off the bat, it's the cover that draws me in. I am a nonfiction person. I love history, I love archaeology. So for me, I need to be able to, the cover needs to reach out and grasp me. And then the title may or may not come in second. But if the cover grasps my attention, I will take it off the shelf and I will read the back for the description of the book. The description is going to have to capture my attention and make me want to open up to the front cover to read more. When it's gotten me to that point, then I already know I'm hooked and I need to read this book because I need to know more about where it's at and what takes place. Descriptive words are a big deal for me, not overly descriptive, but enough to draw me in. I want to be there. I want to be there with the person that's writing. I want to experience it as though I was right there in that moment. So descriptive words, clear, concise writing is important to me. Over the years, I feel like editors have begun to get sloppy in how they write. And so if I read and the first couple chapters have grammatical errors in it, it loses my attention right away. If you're purchasing a book, grammar is important. There shouldn't be grammatical errors. Occasionally, yes, I mean, there's some grace to be extended. I'm not perfect, but when you start to see a repetitive pattern, I will tend to put the book aside and it will lose my attention right away. But I don't know how long you would like me to speak. You just give me a thumbs up when you're ready to take the floor again. But the cover is first, the title not so much. The back description needs to grab my attention and get me to the point to where I want to open up and read some more. And then from there, take me on that journey and let me feel like I am right there with you. I'll hand it back over to you. Thank you, Toastmaster Sheila.
Thank you, Toastmaster Tanya. And I apologize at the beginning of my speech. I did not recognize my president, Toastmaster, or I didn't recognize our guest. Please forgive me, Philip, for not recognizing you at the beginning of my speech. Sometimes I guess when we got these speeches, we got one thing in mind, like Brian said, we got their game face on and we're going with that speech. But I do apologize, and I'm so thankful that you are here. Tanya, you mentioned quite a few things. You actually mentioned something that's not in these tips, and that's the grammar, proofreading, editing. That's, like I say, these are just a few tips that I learned, but I am glad that I hired a proofreader and an editor because a lot of my friends bragged on that to me because they know I'm kind of country, so they knew that I had some help with the grammar. That is one of the main things in the book too. Okay, on another piece of information about the book cover is most authors want to have their picture on the front of the book, most new authors. Now, I was no different, but as most of you know, my picture is not on the front of the book. I gave the desires that I wanted to my designer. Now, I want to drop this in here too. Don't skimp. If you're going to write a book and your cover, don't skimp on your cover. You don't have to spend thousands of dollars, but a couple of $100 will give you a good professional polished look on a book. But at least, so back to my experience, I shared what I had in my mind to my designer, which was a picture of maybe me and my husband walking hand in hand. But our backs was going to be toward, on the front of the book, our backs, you would just see our backs, and we were holding hands, and there was going to be a broken road. But on the back of the book, you would see us again, but you was going to see the front of us. We were still walking down that same road, but our road had become whole. And that's what I had shared with my designer. And I told her, I said, but I also explained to her the content of the book and told her, I said, now we don't have to be on it. You can even use silhouettes of a man and a woman. It don't have to be us. I wanted her to have her freedom in developing this cover. And she contacted me a few weeks later and she says, Sheila, I just can't seem to come up with anything in that line. And so she sent me though, she said, but I do have something and I want to send it to you. So she sent it to me. And when she did, immediately I fell in love with it. There was a few adjustments that had to be made, but she had captured the story all in one picture. The cover, the title, it can make your book or it can break it. And the reason you, as a new author, shouldn't put your picture on the book is because you are new. No one is buying your book for your picture. You may say, Sheila, a lot of famous people have their pictures on their books. Yes, they do. How many times have you been drawn to a book because you seen a famous author on the front? I have bought many books of Joyce Myers, T.D. Jakes, John Maxwell because their picture was on the front. But you know what? We're not them. We're not famous yet. So I strongly suggest you use your cover for a hook and definitely let your title relate to it. And I want to relate this back to the tip number 5 about the titles. You know, famous authors can get away with long titles, such as 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. Developing the Leader Within You by John Maxwell. Maybe one day when I'm famous, I might consider putting my picture on the front of my book. But until it's appropriate, I will continue to have them design without it. So here's one more for the road. 7. And the 7th tip is about marketing and publishing. I learned about halfway through my journey that a person should share their goal of writing a book. Bring your friends, bring your enemies along with you. And I had done just that and didn't even realize that that's what I was doing, that I was already marketing my book. I was posting my word count. I was doing videos. And after my cover got done, I printed it off on the printer. I put it on another book, made a fake cover, and I brought my followers along with me. And I was like sharing with them, if you can hold it in your mind, you can hold it in your hand. And I teased them with bits and pieces of the story. And guess what? It worked. That book came out of the gate like a racehorse that was destined to win. But behind the scenes, you're checking out publishers, you're editing, you're re-editing, you're reading, you're rereading, you're making sure, you're proofreading, you're making sure that when your work goes out to the public, that it's something they want to read. And you're hoping that the decisions that you make are right. We're living in an era that self-publishing has made its way to the top fast. Traditional is almost obsolete. And even now, I am fixing to publish my first Be devotional of a 12-month series. I am researching the significance of owning your own ISBN, which is your International Standard Book Number, which is kind of like the fingerprint for a book. And you can get a free one from any publisher that you are going through, or you can purchase them. Again, I don't have the time to expound on that. But I will say that KDP and Ingram Spark are leading in the print-on-demand books. In this world that we're living in right now, with books that can be wrote and promoted and put on a publishing platform, there are literally thousands of books going out. And because of that, You've got to be one step ahead of them. You've got to be one notch ahead if you want to stand out and make a difference. Now, I shared with you 7 writing tips that I learned along the way. By no means am I an expert. I will be a student for life. Y'all bear with me. I'm fixing to wrap it up. And my heart's desire is that if you want to write a book, do it. But just like I stated at the beginning of this speech, do your research. Do your research, one. Don't listen to too many videos, too many voices. Find your word count for the genre 3 that you are writing. 4, show, don't tell. 5, choose your title wisely. 6, take pride in your cover. It could make your book or break it. 7, market your book from start to finish and be lining up the publishing platform while you're writing your book. This is just a drop in the bucket, but it touches some of the most defining parts of writing a book. I hope after tonight, you will look at writing a book differently. Toastmaster Keith, thank y'all.
Sheila, good job. It's no accident that your book will be successful. No doubt about it.